That's the rocket. There it goes. Here comes the sound. Wow. Interesting. Wow. That's a rocket launch off of Wallops Island. Listen to that. The sound finally arrived. The sound travels at 750 miles per hour. It's very slow. And so you'll see the images much sooner than you'll hear the sound when you're at a distance. Well, the reason why I just included that in my video, because I was going to make a video here. I thought that would be interesting. A rocket launch from NASA. But I want to talk to you about pruning a bit. And I'm sort of in a pinch for pinching because I'm late. It's about, I don't know, June the 14th or so, 13th, 14th. And I haven't been able to get to my trees, the ones that require pinching or would benefit from pinching, and not all trees do. And I've talked about this in my previous videos. Especially, we don't want to be in the habit of pinching little flimsy branches on young trees when they have tiny little branches like this. And I see that people are pinching them to force them to produce 1 or 2 figs when they have a potted plant. We're all anxious to get a fig. I understand that, but you're doing harm to the tree very often, because a little potted plant with a flimsy branch like that is going to utilize all of its energy now to produce a fig or two, and it's going to weaken it considerably, and it's going to become highly susceptible to mealyworms and aphids and different creatures and diseases, attacks, scale. You've weakened it, rust, all of the things that I've noticed people are complaining about sometimes when they're growing fig trees. Well, part of the reason is there's an abuse of pinching, too much pinching. I think it's part of it. And of course, not following a good regiment of organic foods that the figs require, not watering enough. There's lots of misinformation on the internet. And when a fig tree is young, it needs and requires frequent watering and should always be moist and never allowed to be dry. We don't want to overwater. And that makes me think about another problem too by pinching. Sometimes when you pinch too early, you stunt the growth actually of the plant, and it all goes into producing that 1 or 2 fruits or a couple of fruits, which it's too early in its life cycle to sustain. It's not natural. And by doing that, you drain off all these excess energies, and it doesn't evaporate water quickly. And it doesn't grow as quick because you've nipped off the bud. And so now you've got these roots sitting sometimes in water, and you've got these automatic watering irrigation systems. And so it's getting a daily dose of water, but it's not evaporating the water quick enough. So the roots are just sitting in that overly wet soil every day, and you start to get a little bit of root rot or diseases that are associated with that. So always pinch with a grain of salt, shall we say. I like that. Because this is the type of branch that you should be pinching. You see, this is all new growth. Now, I mentioned pruning earlier in this video. Last year, you see, this is where I lobbed it off. Last October, I believe it was. And I did this whole tree. This is my Peter's honey. And I lobbed it off about this height, about 4 foot tall. And I cut every single branch, and I demonstrated that. And you can see that in one of my videos. If you want to look at, you can have your figs and eat them too. You will see this tree in its full glory in that video. And I would like you to take a look at it so that you can see what the results of pruning can be and should be. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'm letting these cars go by. A lot of cars came down to watch the rocket launch. And so this is going to be a little noisy now from time to time. There's another video, how I prune my in-ground fig trees. There's another video where I actually demonstrated cutting this tree specifically. And I had to do it because it was getting much too high for me to deal with, and the birds were getting the figs, and the branches, the large branches, start to knock about the house and bang on the siding. And you know, I have a 2-in-1 system that I use that I've spoken of before, where I let the tree grow because it's so vigorous. I'm going to show you some vigorous trees, which is what I think you should aspire towards. You know, for what it's worth, this is my method, and I want to share it with you. And it might dispel some other myths about growing figs that are commonly perceived, but they're incorrect. And so I'm going to talk all about that in the next couple of minutes. But I have this 2-in-1 system where I let it grow for 2 years, and then I cut it back drastically the 3rd year. I have to maintain control of my trees. Now this is in 7B, which is pretty cold, but I have no problems, and I don't wrap my trees here on this location at all. And many of these trees I don't wrap even in 7A. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do, depending on what my schedule is and if I can get to them or not. Last year I didn't wrap hardly any fig trees, but I got away with murder, and you will get away with murder occasionally in 7A. And if you have a mild winter, you won't regret not covering them. But to be on the safe side, I try to cover as often as I can, especially when they're small enough to manage. When they're not small enough to manage, I prune them drastically. 2 years I let them grow. On the 3rd year, I cut them back very hard. Okay, so you might say let them grow for 3 seasons and cut them at the end of that 3rd season, severely. So that's what I did, and if you want to see what the results are, just look at those videos, and you can see this tree in full glory, and you can also see this tree being cut, pruned drastically back, radically back. Okay, just a few more observations here. Here's some breba. This was a low-hanging branch that I just left, and you see a few breba there. The deer are eating off my leaves. I'll show you on some of my other trees, the deer are getting to them, so it's always nice when my trees get high enough where the deer can't reach them anymore, because they do a little damage to them. But you can see that these branches are fruiting branches, and that's what you should always try to acquire. A fruiting branch, not a little flimsy branch and I want a fig right away. Try to resist the temptation. Delayed gratification. Trust me on that. You don't want your fig tree to be stressed so severely when it's in its early stages of growth. Give it a chance. Don't always be so curious or so excited about what's happening above the ground. I mean, we all are. But try to be cognizant of the importance of what's going on below the ground. And what I mean by that is you want the roots to develop. You want the roots to be adequate. If the roots are adequate, everything else will fall into place gradually, I promise you. So be patient. Let the tree grow, let it flourish, let it evaporate water, okay? And let it put on growth. And then it's far better, instead of to pinch it in its early stages, it's far better to prune it in the fall. To properly prune it, cut off, you know, pick a place. And then in the spring it will develop new branches, and you get proper scaffolding, you get a better proportioned tree, and you get a tree that is more able to produce fruit. And that's the goal. You want to produce fruit like this. Look at these branches. Here's 2 figs there in that node. I mean, there's going to be a fig in absolutely every node. That's what's going to happen here. Look, take a look. Okay, look at the strength. Look at the vigor, the vitality of this tree. The production in figs, look at this. It's going to be enormous. This is going to produce a great yield of delicious, top-notch, exquisite figs. And I won't have to climb up on a ladder to get them this year. I'll be able to get a net over top of this to protect it from the birds. You know, so that I get to enjoy more of the figs than the birds do. And that's another goal. But take a look at the vigor. Look at this growth here. Look at that. And it came right out of where, and you can see that, I pruned it last year. This is all new growth. All this. Look at it. And every node has a fig. So we're going to go ahead now, we're going to pinch these. This is what you pinch for. This is the best reason to pinch. And I've got a lot of pinching to do here. As I say, I'm going to pinch for pinching because I'm out of time. I wasn't here. It's about 2 weeks late, 10 days late to pinch. It doesn't matter, not with a tree that's this vigorous, because all of these fruits will come into fruition this season, every one of them. But I'm going to go ahead and pinch the top. I'm going to pinch every one of these. Some of these branches, by the way, I don't know if you can see this on this angle. I can't quite see. But some of these branches, these fruiting branches, okay? That's what we want, fruiting branches. That's what we want to create. Some of these fruiting branches, here the latex is dripping out, look at that. You can see it dripping. Won't hurt anything. Okay, just keep pinching. Some of these fruiting branches I'm going to thin out because we want plenty of light to come into the tree. It's not as much light as you think. You're going to get plenty of light during the day. You don't have to thin it out as much as you might imagine. That has to be a careful balance too. But in this case, you can see how vigorous this tree is. It's a vigorous grower. It's a magnificent cultivar. And in order to get proper sunlight into the interior and to guarantee that all these figs are going to be superb, I'm going to have to thin it out a little. Not too much, but I will thin it out. Okay, we're getting closer here. I'll come back because I don't want to spend the whole time on this video just nipping off these buds. But I think I made my point about pinching. Pinch yes, but pinch with discretion. Okay? Or like I said previously, pinching with a grain of salt. I think there should be a bit of caution, a bit of reluctance with regards to your methods of pinching and selecting those branches and those trees that properly should be pinched. You get a tree like this that's so vigorous, and here's some more. Look at that. That's new growth figs. That's this year's figs. The main crop figs on new growth. Look at that. How vigorous this, how powerful, how strong this tree is. Just take a look at it. I'll move back a little bit and then we're going to move on. But I really would like you to refer back to those 2 videos if you want to really see what this tree looked like. You can have your figs and eat them too, is one video, and you'll see this tree in its full splendor. And then there's one on pruning, how I prune certain in-ground varieties of my fig trees. And you'll be able to see the natural progress of what happens as a result of radical pruning. And keep in mind too that only certain varieties, okay, make themselves available to that technique and continue their splendor. Some trees do not take well to pruning. They just simply do not. Celeste, for example, and I've explained that on a previous video, Celeste doesn't like to be severely pruned. That doesn't mean you don't severely prune it occasionally. You must, if you have it in ground. But don't expect a lot of fig production that year, the year that you prune it. This is the opposite, or the following year that you prune it. If you prune it in the fall, don't expect with Celeste vehicles for there to be a very, very large production of figs. You will have some, because Celeste produces on new growth, this year's growth, not last year's growth. If it does have last year's growth, the breva, and it does form breva, fall off, and I've talked about that in previous videos too. It's just a main crop fig in this region, and so don't expect a big main crop fig if you severely prune Celeste. But many other varieties like this Peter's Honey and many of the Mount Etnas, and of course other type varieties like Brown Turkey, and I can mention a bunch of them, even Italian Latarula or Italian Honey, they will for sure do very well when they're severely pruned. But don't expect any breva, because the breva on last year's wood. Now, I'm going to move along. I want to show you, here's another tree, and you'll see this in the video too. And this was my XL, Iracondits XL. He created this in his laboratory, actually. It was one of the first humanly hybrid figs in existence, under the direction of the great Iracondit, and it's one of the greatest fig scientists ever. He lived to be 98 years old. He ate a lot of figs. I try to follow that example. I like to eat a lot of figs too. I hope it works. But you'll see that the vigor is here in this XL. It's the same as in my Peter's Honey. You can feel the texture of these. I can identify a lot of these trees by believe it or not, the texture of their leaves. You can, if you don't know sometimes exactly what a variety is, if you become familiar with the texture, listen to that. You can almost, if you're familiar with your figs, like this is a Celeste, and it's got a velvety, soft feel to its leaves. This particular variant of Celeste has a soft feel. Now over here, I wanted to just quickly talk about this tree. This is only in its third year. It's a splendid example of an Adriatic fig. Green on the outside, a beautiful crimson red or reddish color, rich reddish color on the inside. A famous group of figs that are well known for their delectability. They're so tasty. They're delicious. And they're also known for their trait of being a very late producer, unfortunately. And so if you're in a higher zone than 7B or 7A or 7B, you know, you can get a pretty good crop if you have an Indian summer. If you're in higher zones, you get a great crop, a late crop, but a good crop. But if you're in these zones such as I am in, which are short seasoned, very often you won't get a very good crop unless you have an Indian summer, if it's an in-ground variety. So these are sometimes better grown in pots. And they're all basically the same, the Adriatics. You know, I can name a bunch of them, like greenish shea. You can talk about, you know, JH Adriatic, Battaglia Green. They're all basically, you know, White Madeira. They're all basically Adriatic figs, and very similar in characteristics. There's not a great deal of difference between them. even strawberry verte, and that's what this is. I think it is that. This was a fig that my Uncle Mario brought from Italy 65, 70 years ago. I don't know how long. And I have kept it for over 50 years. I've kept it in my family. I cherish this fig. I cherish the memory of my Uncle Mario too. And this produces an exquisite Adriatic tasting fig. It's just so tasty. They're all tasty. But I love the tangy taste of this particular fig. But this one is also late. Now this one's uncharacteristically even later than it generally is. Here we are in the middle of June, and it's not formulating a lot of figs yet. Last year it did, a little bit earlier. These things happen. We as humans may never know the reasons for that. Okay, those secrets may be guarded by nature forever into eternity. Perhaps we will discover some of them. I see a little fig formulating right there. Okay, now this has pretty good new growth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 leaves. So that's enough. I would like to let this grow a little bit more because it's in a microclimate that I've planted it in. It's in a very good location where it gets plenty of sunshine and it gets protected from the northern winds by the house. I'm particularly excited about this variety. I love this variety. I love the taste of it when you get to eat them. Okay, it grows well in a container, but I'm going to nip the bud off this. Okay, anyway, even though I would probably like to let it grow just a little bit more. I might not be here to do it, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I don't know about the other ones. I want to come back and rethink about the other. I might want to, of course, once you nip off the bud, you're going to get more scaffolding, which I encourage here. I want this to form many branches because I'll be able to put a net up there, staple a net, and bring it back around and protect it from the birds when I'm away, so I get to eat some of these figs and enjoy them. Okay, I'll move along now. Okay, I'll come back and probably nip off a few more of these buds. But here I've got to take these off. This is the XL that we were talking about. So same as the Peters, I'm going to go ahead and pop off and pinch all of these so that it's already forming a lot of fruit. And you don't always have to pinch every branch. I believe that once you pinch a few, it sends the hormones and the signals and you know the chemical compounds that are necessary to send a message to the fig tree to produce more fruit faster. I believe it happens. I don't think you have to do every single branch. Sometimes you do it anyway because you don't want them to grow 5, 6, 7 foot tall. You know, you want to try and keep the tree under control, and hopefully it will send out a few more shoots so that you get more branches in the spring next year. Of course, I don't need too many. You see, I have plenty of branches here in all of the trees. Why? Because they're vigorous. These trees are vigorous, they're healthy. Okay, and I raised them that way. I raised them to be vigorous and healthy. Okay, that's what your goal is. That's what your goal is. For what it's worth, that's my opinion. Okay, try to raise healthy, productive fruit branches. Okay, how to produce them? You give your trees plenty of water, plenty of food. Okay, make sure they have a proper acidity, which I've talked about in the past. You want it to be neutral or slightly alkaline, in my opinion. Lots of calcium. The more calcium you can add when you plant your fig trees in the ground, just dig the hole large enough for the root ball. You want to compress those roots, get them in the ground, and don't worry about trying fig trees in the ground too. I noticed that there's a misperception and misrepresentation. I hear often that, you know, your roots are going to die in 7A or 7B, and, you know, you've got to mulch so much. I don't even mulch. Look at my trees. I honestly, and that's something I've never really talked about, but I just don't mulch. I look at any of my videos, look at my container figs. I don't mulch because I believe that too much mulching smothers a tree. And I want my trees to grow vigorously. I want them to produce fruit. That's why I'm growing figs, okay? And I have noticed many, many years ago that mulching, especially over mulching, is a mistake. It's a huge mistake. The only time I mulch is in the winter time, okay, to protect the roots, okay? And as soon as it starts to warm up in the spring, I get that mulch out of there so that the ground can heat up by the sun. I get that mulch out of there. And yeah, you have to water a little bit more. So what? Nobody said that raising figs is an easy job to do. It's not. You know, growing figs is work. It is. And there's methods that you can use to do it better, okay? Anything that I can do, you can do better. And I mean that. And I can be better next year too. Good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better best. That's how I live my whole life. I try to improve. And that's the reason why I'm making these videos, so that you can acquire some of these techniques and methods that I have used to get results like this. That's a Mount Etna type. It's a Hardy Chicago type fig. Okay, it's been here for many, many years, over 25, and it's just growing, it's flourishing, and it has plenty of figs. Look, let's take a look at this thing. Look at it. Now I don't have to, in this case, I don't have to pinch this tree, and I may come back and do some pinching. It's not going to hurt. I mean, not a vigorous tree like this. I can pinch it all I want. But this is going to produce a great abundance of figs. A great abundance. A huge yield of exquisite fruits that I'm going to enjoy, for sure, as much as I possibly can this season. So we've looked at that, and so try to remember some of these principles. And I went off track a little bit, but with regards to don't avoid trying to grow your fig trees in the ground. Don't worry about losing your variety. Many varieties aren't acceptable to being grown in the ground. So you don't want to just put prima donna type figs in the ground. Certain figs that have a reputation, an established reputation for not being very cold hardy. But the ones that are, you can put them in the ground. And listen, even if they die back, even if you wrap them and they die back, don't believe that the roots are going to die. If you put a little mulch in the wintertime over the roots, 99% of the time, even if the tree dies to the ground, the roots are going to sprout new shoots. That's been my experience. For what it's worth, that's my opinion. I've done it so many times for many, many, many years, decades. And you don't have to worry about your tree dying in the ground. If it does, it died for a different reason, not because of the cold. So give it a try. I mean, try putting more trees in the ground. Because quite frankly, I just don't know what I would do if I didn't have my in-ground fig trees to produce a great abundance of fruit. I love my in-ground fig trees. They're easier to manage, easier to take care of. The taste is more exquisite. Figs always taste better in the ground than their in-potted counterparts. Okay, I want to talk to you about this variety someday. I'm not going to. Here I planted an experimental fig. This is actually Smith, and I planted it well into the ground, and it's a beautiful tree. It's very vigorous, very healthy. The deer have come and eaten some of the leaves off of it. They do that. And what I'm going to do probably very soon, I just want you to know, is I'm going to cut off. I'm going to probably cut these, let's get a little bit further distance, here somewhere, so that they sprout out new shoots here, okay, at these nodes and places. I'm going to go ahead and cut them shorter, and so that I'll get better scaffolding. These are fine. I'm going to pinch these later, and then they'll send out more branches, because I want to get as many branches growing as I can in this spot. Okay, so I will lob these off. They're a little tall, but that's okay. I'm leaving them alone right now until the tree gets established. And after it does, I'll prune it so that I get optimal scaffolding. Okay, here is a middle-sized Celeste tree. It used to be much, much larger. You can see down here how large it used to be. Okay, and actually there were some that rotted away because this is a very old tree that I planted about 26 or 7 years ago. And it's grown huge, and I cut it back and I cut it back. You have to. And it has a lot of figs on it. You can see Celeste always does. You can see the fruit here. I'm looking forward to these figs. I have a very large Celeste tree home, which I featured several times. You can see on my videos. I love Celeste. I just think it's one of the most underrated figs in existence. And apparently Dr. O'Rourke, in his Louisiana State University figs, the LSU figs, which are extremely popular and I am a big fan of too, use Celeste in the breeding program. In almost every single one of them, Celeste was the parent. And there's a reason for that. Of course, I've talked about this before, and so I won't go into it again, not in this video, but if you're interested, you can look at No Brainer Figs as one of my videos, which shows you a beautiful Celeste tree in its glory. And the Mighty Chincoteague Celeste is another one that I talk about this variety in detail. You might want to look at those videos. There's other videos too where I sing the praises of Celeste because it's just a magnificent cultivar. And in my personal opinion, here we go again, okay, neck on the chopping block. If you're a grower, a serious grower of figs, and you have a warm enough climate, which would be 7A and up, to grow an in-ground Celeste, by all means, I would highly recommend that you have a Celeste. You know, if you're a newcomer, if you're a newbie, the first tree, if you have room for more, the first tree you should plant perhaps in your yard is a Celeste tree in ground. Okay, and container figs is a whole other subject, and I don't particularly like Celeste in containers, so I don't recommend it. I will not recommend it. Many fig varieties I don't recommend for containers, and some I do. And here, let's end this video because it's getting kind of long. I have so many more trees I want to show you and things I want to show you, but this is what I would consider a splendid tree. And I've talked about this. This is Desert King, and I like to refer to it as Desert King, which I believe was the original name, and then it got morphed when it was first discovered, widely discovered in California many decades ago, and it was sensational. Look at this. These are Breba, formed on last year's wood. These are first crops, not on new wood, and you can see that the main crop is formulating already. Okay, and we're only in the middle of June, but these will be ready in less than 2 weeks. These will start to get ripe. I've done other videos on